What's up, world? This is Lucid. Happy to close out 2024 with the Cabbages podcast. Thank y'all.
Hello, Gary.
What the fuck with this movie, man? What did I just watch? Are we in a simulation? Is this like somebody's idea of what reality is? When is this a video game? When is this not a video game? Why are all these characters' accents changing constantly? Where are the people and where are the NPCs? Is anything real? Are the corporations that are rivaling each other for this real? What are you doing with your head?
Hello, Gary.
Hello, music industry insider Jeffrey Laughlin. Would you like to talk about the movie?
I would like to play the game. Do you know about the game?
Oh God. Well, guys, it's ELUCID on eXistenZ. Coming up next.
Do you ever just come in the house and just not take things off?
Yeah.
I did.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
I'll put the sweater on, but I don't know why I have the hat on. I kept the hat.
I like that we're like reversed.
You guys are.
We're kind of reverse of each other. I love it.
It's like the yellow up here versus down there. Yeah.
Oh, that's
You guys
tight.
I
Now,
like it.
that does make me question whether or not we're in reality or
Ooh.
some kind of virtual
That's
reality.
the
perhaps.
question.
A reality slide here. Okay.
Oh,
Are we
my
recording
God.
yet?
I'm already recording. I mean, there's no
Okay,
reason
great.
not to do it.
I love
I
it.
should intro you before we actually do.
Let's do
get
it.
into
Let's
this.
intro. Let's do
But
this.
man, I mean, look, I couldn't be happier about introducing our guest for today's show. Joining us now is the one and only ELUCID, our returning guest, this ingenious Brooklyn rapper behind Armand Hammer and Small Bills. He never fails to impress on his solo albums, and his latest one, Revelator, is no exception. You can pick that up via Fat Possum Records, on Bandcamp, or wherever music is streamed or sold. And be sure to catch him live on the Revelator tour starting this winter, hitting cities across the US and Europe. Check on the show notes. We'll have all those dates in there. And trust me when I say this, as someone who's seen Lucid live a number of times, buy your tickets in advance. You're definitely not going to want to miss it. Hello, Lucid, and welcome to the show.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. What's up? Good to talk to y'all again.
Yeah,
I like
Good to see you.
the hell. That's the venue in Queens.
No, that's the newspaper. That's kind of like the worker-run newspaper.
Oh, okay, okay.
Has a good lefty sort of streak to it. A lot of poking at Eric Adams, so it's a personal favorite of mine. Well worth my subscription money.
Like online, probably.
Oh yeah.
But
For sure.
Reminds me of like that venue. The Karma Kids used to play at Hellgate in Astoria.
It's so funny because I live in Queens and I saw an old flyer from years back of a show at the Hellgate, and it was like and it was like Karma Kids guys. I think Prem Rock was on that bill too.
Like Open Mike Eagle played there as well. Maybe not.
That was the flyer. That was the flyer I saw, and I was like, "That's crazy," because that's just like I could walk there.
Yeah,
but not anymore. But look, we've talked to you before, obviously on this show.
Do you believe you went there in reality?
Oh God, we're just. I mean, that's that's the thing that's going to be the thorniest part of this is just the reality side of it. But I want to
Let's set a base layer first before we get into reality.
Before we really lose the fucking plot. Had you seen this movie before? Were you like a Cronenberg head? Like, what's your sort of experience?
I had never seen this movie before. I've seen probably a couple other of like Cronenberg's movies. Like I feel like he did Scanners.
Yep.
I never saw this one, and I feel like I was always kind of like around, but I never sat with it. So I did sit with it.
Yeah,
it was pretty cool.
Yeah. This was one that I had seen before, and I was saying this before you hopped on that like in 1999 I was like in an industrial band. I was an industrial DJ at the time, and I had like a radio show in college. And so like this and The Matrix coming out were just like, oh, these were made for me. These were strange movies, cyberpunk films made for me. And I think, we can safely say this is cyberpunk, right? The genre seems pretty clear.
Yeah. I see that, and I kind of didn't connect the year with Matrix. Like, did very different movies. Like, probably just budget because of budget, but the story, you know, the shifting kind of like the shifting sand of like reality. I love that. I love that.
Reality.
There's also portals into your body in both movies. At least the Matrix has the decency to put it up at your neck rather than right up above your ass.
At the bottom of your spine.
Joke off. It didn't take it. That's what I kind of liked about it. I was like, at first I was like, oh, this is real silly. And then I leaned into the silliness, and it was like, that's hilarious. You know what I mean? Like, why not? You're gonna get a tongue in the pot, joke off.
You kind of have to, you know. Yeah. And then they do a number of visual gags in this, and like, you know, there's a lot of stuff with this film, but like one of the things that I really noticed on the rewatch that maybe I didn't catch so much the first time I saw it 20 something years ago was that this is a really sexual movie. Like when he licks the portal, when Jude Law licks Jennifer Jason Leigh's portal, and like unprompted, by the way. Oh, this is what we're looking at now. Okay, this is what we're doing in here. And then there's this whole scene with like him and Willem Dafoe where they're like talking about the implanting basically to do the port on Jude Law. And it's just like, it sounds like a conversation about like a virgin and a non-virgin, a much more experienced person sexually and somebody who is inexperienced sexually, like having a conversation about what it's going to be like. I had real no idea, and I should have learned my lesson because the film he did before this was Crash, the J.G. Ballard novel, that this was going to be some freaky shit.
It was about like the getting turned on by car crashes and stuff, right? Like that. But yeah, also like I was thinking like it was also like really sexual with like also like pregnancy with gas, and kept talking about the epidural, and I feel like there's another kind of like Prego joke in there. So yeah, all this like deep, intimate, up close and personal, inside and out. But like, she's the game designer, right? Like she's working with like the nooks and crannies of this shit, and it gets like that. You know what I mean?
Is she a game designer? Do we know that for sure? I'm just listen. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this the whole time. We don't know anything for sure.
Yeah.
Her video game persona could be that.
We don't. Yeah.
Yeah.
One way or another, that's what they want us to. That's what they want us to.
And also, design is such a loose term in this film, since so much of what's happening seems to be beyond the so-called creator, the demoness, whatever you want to call her, Jennifer Jason Leigh's Allegra Geller. There's so much about this is about like her design, yet nothing that happens in it seems to be predictable to her.
Yeah, happening to her. It's with the Jude Law character.
Yeah.
She's like a sage in a way. Right. Always dropping like, what's that line? You won't be able to stop yourself. You might as well enjoy it. Like she just pops up.
Right. She's like, enjoy murder. Like you need to be a murderer.
Yeah.
If you're going to do this, you need to learn how to be a murderer, dude. Obviously. Okay.
Okay.
Again, I'm not here just to question every single thing, but in a way, her role serves to sort of be a guide for him to learn how to play video games.
Yeah.
And in the 90s and into the 2000s, there were these games where you would have like an omniscient narrator sort of guide. Like I'm thinking especially like in a Mario game where someone will come down and be like, you don't know how to like jump higher. If you do these two things together, you'll jump higher and you can clear this thing. She's sort of there to be like, hey, dude, I know these are complex emotions, but they're not real. You can kill this guy. He doesn't exist. He's just a game character. And as the movie progresses and he gets better, she then just starts to like have fun and play the game. Earmarked by when she shoots her friend who like gave them a bungalow to stay in when they were wanted by the network. You know what I'm saying? Does this make any sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It does. It does
raise so weird.
But does raise that raises a question about like what we're looking at, because we're presented a film that is, while it is making you question what you're seeing throughout, you are still looking at presented like I'm watching a film that goes from start to finish. I'm watching a narrative. It stars these two people, and we see them interacting with people along the way. The role that she plays in this makes it seem like potentially what we're looking at is a game where Jude Law is the player and Jennifer Jason Leigh is the helpful guide character that gets her through it. which means that character loses agency if that person's not necessarily human. But then that also, and this is where it gets complicated. Of course, all this gets complicated, but this is where it's like then is the final scene where they're in the chapel, and now it's a totally different gaming situation, and she's a player, not the creator. Like, was she playable all along? Was this like a thing where you introduce her later?
Yeah, I feel like she was playable all along. It's like God mode, just like can run it on simulation, and then I want to tap in and feel something, and then I'll tap back out. I kind of dug that.
I did too. This was like you make your own mistakes and I'll jump in. Like, this is going to sound so dumb. If you haven't seen the movie, you really should just knock this one off for a second and go watch the film, because none of this is going to make any sense. But in the third level of the game, they've poured it in twice now. So they poured it into the game, and then they poured it into the game within a game. And each level you go down seems to be less complicated. And the non-playable characters are more video gamey, if that makes sense. As they move through levels and they get to the level where he's sort of learning how to do things, that's when she's like, okay.
You have to play the game if you want to know how to play the game.
Exactly. He's got to learn how to play, so they keep going deeper and deeper to where it's simpler, and each level of the game seems to be simpler, and there's less
they start talking to the NPCs like just in command.
Right. And then the NPCs are like NPCs from our life, which are like, if you're not talking to them, they just like wander around and don't know what's going on. They're not real.
Well, just wait until your name is called. Sit down.
Then they ascend back up into other levels, and those NPCs are more complicated now. Like I forget the guy's name, but the guy that put them up when they were wanted was a very complicated NPC.
Ian Holmes' character.
Ian Holmes.
Kini Vinokur, which is a nod to the Hungarian producers of this film.
Yes. So
wait, was that the guy in the basement cutting the fish?
No, that's Elias. That's Elias Codius, the poor man's Chris Maloney. But no, Ian Holm is the one from Fifth Element and Lord of the Rings. He's the one who lets them kind of stay, but then and later on in whatever level of the game we're in, he is also a double agent working for the other rival company.
Gotcha.
And so I don't. I'm also really fascinated by like the corporate espionage angle for this, because that was such a common theme in cyberpunk stuff. Johnny Mnemonic is a great example of that. A lot of these films were like in that period were about it. New Rose Hotel, which is definitely auteurish like this, that Abel Ferrara did, based off of a classic cyberpunk novel or story. Like that's another one where it's about business intrigue and what people will do. And then a few years later, 2002, you get Oliver Assayas's really fucked up Demon Lover, which is this which is another one that haunts me to this day, the way that's set up. But like, I found that really an interesting angle to this, in that while we were wrestling whether or not we were seeing reality, these two rival gaming companies seem to be constants. And that may have been one of the only real things, if you accept this all as a game, one of the only real things that existed is that these were companies vying for this, IP essentially. See, this is what this movie does to you. It's just kind of like,
I know,
it makes you go down these, and it makes me mad. It makes me mad.
Let me just ask.
All like the grandest conspiracies, just like simplified into like this video game plot that we all most of us grew up on video games at this age,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask the big question, and hopefully it will like dissolve into smaller questions, and we can get past this idea of what reality might be.
I hope so, man. I hope so.
Did we ever at any juncture see reality in this film? Were we in the game the whole time from the very beginning?
My working theory is that from the beginning title cards, we are watching. It's a video game. from the very beginning, before we even meet a character,
Same.
there's bidding title cards names
That we're in the first level of the game.
or like it's loading or whatever, like that's
Yeah.
we're getting to that stage. And I remember that, but I think about like stuff like games like Quake,
Yes.
PC games like that back in the 90s where you had the load screens and everything builds up to that point. But I personally, my theory on this is that everything is virtual reality or game until the final scene in the chapel, when now they're wearing the blue kind of shiny tech instead of the fleshy, portal stuff. And it's suddenly now it feels like much more like you're watching something real happening. It feels responses to a video game experience. It raises a lot of questions again about what you saw before it, in terms of some of these, like, some of these characters, like, well, I was kind of bummed out that I was only in there for a very short period of time. It's like, what do you do?
So you believe the initial church that we're in is a video game? That's part of the video game.
Yes, I believe the first church area we're in is a video game. Yes.
Okay.
But I think that the
Lucid,
very
where
end,
you at?
Isn't that? I feel like that would be where the game starts.
Right. So we're introed in, and the first thing we see are the people who are about to play the game.
Mm-hmm.
And then they go into the video game, or they're already in it and they go a level deeper?
They go with that. I feel like they go into the video game there.
Okay. So that first part is a reality.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But what about the final scene? Do you think that's part
I mean,
of the
you could think the other way, but then they'll give just like bring you down the darker end of the conspiracy where there's no consent. Everyone's
if the first thing we see is video game, then they're like 5 levels deep in porting in this video game by the time we get to the end. That we're so far in that there is no way out. And knowing Cronenberg, I feel like that's where I'm going to go, is that we were always in it the whole time. The last part is also part of the game, that it's the end of their game. That they're like, the only way to win is not to play and to kill the creator of the game.
It's just fucked up. It's just fucked up.
Yeah, it's some war game shit.
Yeah, but what's interesting is I do research before these to try to find out some information. Again, I said this earlier.
Can I take a guess that you found out nothing that makes any sense about this?
Very little.
I tried to find stuff too, and everyone is just like, "Yes, movie's weird." that's like the whole.
Yeah, I'm curious. I didn't do any kind of like sideline research, but like I'm curious of the perception of the movie.
Well, one of the first,
like, I didn't see the Rotten Tomatoes review.
The Rotten Tomatoes score is high. It's high. It's high, and I think it's a combination of, one of the things that Rotten Tomatoes scores is that subsequent reviews after release, meaning more contemporary reviews, can skew something. Positive look back on it on a DVD or Blu-ray Criterion edition of a movie can adjust the scoring. But like, it has like a 75% on there, which I don't necessarily know. Like, Ebert gave it like 3 out of 4 stars, and it was reviewed favorably by critics at the time, but it had a very limited theatrical run through Dimension Films, which was like a subsidiary of Miramax, which was a subsidiary at the time of Disney. So it's like, it was buried, and it came out in theaters, even though it debuted at the Berlin International Film Festival in February of '99. It came out after The Matrix dropped in March of '99, like weeks later.
I feel like that's also like Don't Be a Menace to South Central while drinking your juice in the hood. That was on Dimension Films. I feel like Scream was on Dimension Films.
Yeah.
They were popping that year, 99, 98. Okay.
It's like an interesting time for that shingle, if you will, that's gonna be up there. But like, it's also like, this movie suffers from, basically, it came out after The Matrix, and like, I think people respected the auteur director for doing another risky body horror type film, but at the same time, it's like, we're seeing the popcorn version of it already.
The body horror, it's almost like external body horror, if that makes any sense. It's not like these people's bodies change all that much, but there's like guns made with teeth in them, and the things they eat, and
like always uncomfortable. The whole implanting.
Yeah.
It's always got to go in you.
The implanting part. There's also within the game has a farm where they like raise mutants to farm for parts?
Trout.
First of all, why is the video game system made out of living parts? What does that have to do with anything? There's not a single you could ask any video game developer in the business, and I guarantee you they will not come up with an answer. And they will not say, oh, we're moving toward we're moving toward making video games out of mutant parts, out of mutant fish. Not one of them is going to say, why are these things weird living beings? It's so strange.
I have to feel like, other than the fact that this is absolutely Cronenberg's forte, is just to do things to the body and keep doing things to the body. I think it's probably also some sort of low-level commentary about like genetically modified foods and you know, kind of, and gene splicing. You know, there are other films from that era that do similar things, like Species, for example, like is another one where it's like they talk about, you know, sort of what mutations could do and how we could advance ourselves by enhancing our bodies, body modification.
Right.
You know, I think that's there, but that's why it's sort of why I feel like the scene in the chapel at the very end, where suddenly now there's no longer fleshy tech. Everything is this blue gear feels more real because it's reality.
Right.
Because to me, that's like, okay, that's actually, and this movie's supposed to take place in 2030. So only, you know, basically 5 years from now, 6 years from now. We're looking at what seems like a much more realistic thing. It was like, you in a game, once you think of all that precedes that scene as a game, then it makes sense. Yeah, anything could be fleshy, and anything, they can make video games out of frog parts. It doesn't matter.
There's weird tells throughout the movie to tell you that you're in a video game, right? Like the weird fleshy things disappear when we go to this final possible reality, and it becomes hardware, and that's a tell. And there's the gun appears throughout these levels. The weird gun made out of what I can only think are mutant flesh, and somehow becomes a gun, and bones and teeth. That thing appears throughout these levels. And then in the last thing, they're pointing actual guns at this guy. So that's a big deal. The one thing that throws me, and I think it's there specifically to throw me, is in the last scene, there's a dog that was in the video game that's also in this like supposed reality. And they strip off the dog's hair and pull the guns off of the dog to kill this man. And I just, at that point, I don't know why it took me this long to lose it, but I lost it. I was like, you motherfuckers, you couldn't just let us have one of these be reality that makes sense. Nothing makes sense. You had to pull the reference of the dog from the video game into this final scene to make sure that truly nothing is real.
At what point, ELUCID, did you give up and just accept this for the silliness? You said something before about that. At what point did you say that's it?
Maybe about 30 minutes. Maybe about 30 minutes. Like once they started playing. Once they started playing, and I was like, oh, something clicked, you know? And then I really got into it, and I watched it up until just about everything. And when they got back into the chapel. That was pretty much it there, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I love that.
My first inclination that this thing was ridiculous was them being in the, like, they've poured it in and they're playing this thing, and then she's like, I need to know, are you friendly or are you unfriendly? And his response was, sure. I was like, well, if this is meaningless, then we're fine. Everything's going to be fine. And then I was pulled back in by the dog thing. I was like, that sucks. Why did you do that to me? I was right. I was with you. I was with you up until then.
Yeah, I'm getting the same feeling the last time I was on here. We talked about Leprechaun in space. And I'm getting the same feeling. I was like, yo, I feel like these movies that y'all be picking, I feel like I got to be in the same room with y'all watching the movie. There's like dialogue and jokes that like happen. It's like, I probably would have to see it again if I weren't in that room with y'all. You know what I'm saying? Because like y'all kind of know these things. But yeah.
You got to understand.
You're welcome to pull up and watch these movies.
I'm just saying, you know, we're both local. I mean, we can make it happen.
Yeah, we can hang if we want, man.
the truth is that we watch these things remotely. I watch it in my place, he watches his, and we text each other throughout. So we do create these sort of dialogues about what the fuck did I just see, and one of us will notice something the other didn't, and it just keeps going on. It's so fucked up because this film is so weird and makes so many weird choices, and like some very unserious choices along the way. But what's really profound to me is that it is inspired by something very real and actually really quite chilling. The original concept for this movie comes from Salman Rushdie and comes from an interview that Cronenberg did in the
That's why they use the
90s.
word fatwa.
Ian Holmes' character says fatwa in the scene where he welcomes them in to protect them after they've been dealing with their stuff, and that's where they begin the next level of the game. But that word is used intentionally because it is about very much what happens when a creator creates a piece of art or entertainment and creates such a backlash that warrants that calls for that creator's death. And so that is a very direct correlation between they're trying to kill Allegra Geller for making this game, and they say for this movement, the realists in this case, seems like a secular humanist, terrorist activist organization, is trying to design in the same way that radical terrorists were going after Salman Rushdie, and ultimately, only a few years back, actually really did get to him and cause some serious harm. I think he's partially blind at this stage. But like back in the 90s, like we didn't know we found out what a fatwa was because of the Rushdie situation. And Cronenberg, when he interviewed him, was very keen on the idea of like, he didn't think Rushdie would have necessarily have known while he was writing this that it could really have been so dangerous for him to do so. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that all the way, but I do agree that it's such a very serious thing to base this movie on, to then go completely bonkers on everything else, to make everything else so silly. I find it so strange that it is then filtered through gaming, which at the time was certainly prevalent, but nowhere near what it is now. And I don't think there's been a video game yet that has that has warranted true violence upon its creators for anything other than perhaps again, corporate espionage. But I think we're looking at a very silly movie that's based off a very serious topic, and you rarely do see that.
That's masterful. Like criticizing the present through the future. That's ill. That's a really ill lens there. I didn't know that.
And you're also looking
Rushdie line in the next couple songs. You know where I got it. You know where I got the inspiration.
If we could inspire you in any way, shape, or form.
No, if we could bring you on to see Leprechaun in space and eXistenZ, and you
the stupidest movies. If we can bring anything to your art,
really accomplished something.
Look, I'm already happy. We had Fat Tony and Fat Boy Sharif on an episode last season for Kids in the Hall Brain Candy, and then they named their album Brain Candy. So we clearly have an influence on the culture in some way, shape, or form.
In a really weird way.
In a very weird way.
That's hard.
When Jennifer Jason Leigh and Jude Law signed up to do this movie, Cronenberg made them read, gave them homework, made them read Sartre and Kierkegaard, made them become armchair experts on existentialism, made them to understand what they were getting into.
Perhaps that's why, they play this thing. I think the performances are incredible, because if you had handed me the script and said, read this and then act very seriously, I'd be like, you should find actors. I can't deliver this and not laugh through the entire movie. I just can't. I'm not going to be able to do it. And he got these were serious performances with wild dialogue. I think they really nailed being serious into this gaming world.
The performances are really interesting when you watch this more than once. We watched it twice before this episode, because you start to see things like their accents change at different times across the film. The hair styles change across the film
as they go up and down layers of this video game, they themselves, they're like characters change
Like
appearance. They change a lot.
it's like it's curly straight for Jennifer Jason Leigh's hair.
Stop that.
Like you so there's stuff like that that happens in it. So like there he's I feel like Cronenberg is giving us some clues. He's giving us something to
Yeah.
work with in this, but like I think in execution it's just we're so deep in a video game that much like Jude Law's character theoretically, if you don't believe that he's a double agent or if you don't believe that he's actually a realist style secular
Just a
uh
quick
humanist
posit on
terrorist.
that.
Yeah.
I think that all of the things that he does are him figuring out how to play video games. So like when
Mm.
he decides, is like, oh, I'm a double agent. I'm the one that's been trying to kill you all along. She, of course, is like, I knew at some point you would do this because
But,
I'm an expert
but are
gamer.
you talking about when they got the special, and then the gun appeared with the bones? Is that the moment you're talking about?
There's two moments. That's one of them where he points the animal gun. I
Yeah,
don't really know the mutant gun at her. The tooth gun is what we were texting back and forth.
Tooth
So
gun.
he points the teeth gun at her, and that's when he's sort of like he's figuring out like, oh, you can do whatever you want. There's
yeah.
certain things you have to do to push the game forward. But I could, if I, in theory, I could just kill her and win this video game
But I feel like
right now. Like I can end it.
that was like also him. Maybe was that the first time or the second time? Maybe that he realized that he was in total control. The
Right.
other time I'm thinking of is like when he was like put the game on pause. Was that first?
Yes, that was a big deal, is that he knows now that he has a reality. Thing
Yeah,
is he jumped backwards one reality level, I guess, but it was still a game. So he thinks he's in control, but he's still in this video game.
yeah.
Then there's the third part where he finally does is like, oh, okay, I'm just going to point the gun at Jennifer Jason Leigh for real this time. And it's supposedly a real gun. And it's very confusing if it's reality or not, but we know it's not. And he points the gun at her and she's like, finally, you get it. And I can blow
Uh,
you up and we can start really playing this video game because you now
yeah, because
understand
he want to
how to
kill.
play.
He didn't want to kill before that.
Right.
He didn't want to kill, and his morality was peeping. And she was like, "Yo, just play the game. It's all right." Just
And then there's a couple
and
of
then he
times
was
where he was like,
fully owns it. Doesn't even know where it comes from.
I'm confused on what's real and what's not. And she's
Yeah,
like, cool, that just means that you are playing a video game.
yeah, that was cool how they put that idea out. That was cool.
Once he reaches this level, then they really start playing. And then we end up in this final church and they kill the designer of a different video game system. That's the other thing, is that we jump from
Wait, the
eXistenZ.
recruiter?
Yeah. We jump
Yeah,
from eXistenZ and they're making what would
Transcendence.
Transcendence. Yeah. Transcendence.
Fuck me.
And I was just like, all right,
yeah,
if the video game itself is about video game designers and designing a video game system, then no one's going to buy this piece of shit. I don't care how cool it is. I don't care how many people you get to kill. I don't care who makes out with you and how real it feels. If it's about making a video game, you're not going to sell any copies of this fucking thing. I'm sorry.
It just takes the format very self-serious in that way.
Yeah.
And like I think we know again, we've had more time with gaming culture in mixed in with popular culture now, becoming popular culture in so many ways, in these past, 2 decades, that Cronenberg did have the benefit of that we have to be able to say. Like
Right.
it's ubiquitous, but no one's going to die for these games. No one's
It's
thinking
the
about
same
these
way
things these
that
ways.
if Cabbages are around in 10 years, we'll have you on and we'll do that Megan movie about the AI doll. And we'll make fun of it because like there wasn't a whole lot of AI when they made that thing.
Yeah.
So they just like had to make some weird creative choices. They didn't
Yeah.
make Cronenberg choices, but they did make choices.
In
The
fairness,
Cronenberg choices, we're going to make you eat one of the most disgusting scenes I've seen in a film is when they go to the Chinese restaurant and he eats all the meat off of these things to make the tooth gun.
that's
Is
not the
I
that's
mean,
not the grossest thing to me.
it made
That's
me
not the
want to
grossest to
throw
me.
up. Him
No.
licking the porthole also.
No, No,
That got me pretty good.
it's actually, to me, the grossest thing I think I can say in this movie is the application of chapstick style lubricant to the porthole.
Yeah.
You gotta lube up the porthole, dude.
Yeah, it's more of
You can't just burn it on a dry run, baby.
Yeah, and one time he didn't have any. They had the mini pod, and he had to just use the old spit.
You had to raw dog
spit.
it.
Yeah.
Raw dogging virtual reality. That's really, that would be that's the subject. That's the tagline for this fucking movie. Raw dogging virtual reality.
Don't it raw dog virtual. Folks, if you've learned anything from the Cabbages Hip Hop podcast, do not raw dog virtual reality. The results are disgusting.
But it does bring us to kind of the grand question that takes us beyond this movie, is that like not in a few years after this film and The Matrix came out, a philosopher, Nick Bostrom, kind of formally posed the what we call the simulation hypothesis, which this idea that are we humans, are we living in a simulation right now? Like this is informed by like computational physics and computing, like there's sorts of like all these different disciplines academically have fed into this theory, and there's been a lot of debate and dialogue academically over the decades since that. But now with the way in which we talk about the like phrases like NPC are now part of the conversation, like sort of the nomenclature, the lingo of this thing that used to be limited to weird novels by William Gibson and Philip K. Dick and so many other very talented writers. We're now looking at a world where we're like maybe cognizant of that we're in this. So I have to pose the question to our guest and to you, Jeff. Like, do you think there's any way that possibly we are living in a simulation right now?
Oh man, it's an interesting one to spin the wheels around in the mud. It's an interesting one. It removes all sorts of like meaning, which is cool, I guess. Which is cool, I guess. And I guess we all have the ability to tap in and out. But it's an interesting one.
If we're living in a, I can't answer that question. If we're living in a
look, I would never have asked that if we didn't have a smart guest on. I would never have asked that question. I'm like, I need somebody who's gonna go. I'm gonna mess up the rest of your day thinking about this over fucking sandwiches at dinner, whatever it is. You're gonna be like, is this simulation? Like, what does it matter what I put on this sandwich? Like, am I actually getting any nutrition out of this?
I think the most interesting question that comes from the simulation and theory is who is alive in the simulation and who isn't. And I try, ever since I read about this theory a long time ago, I have tried really hard to figure out which people are real and which are not. Because you're encountering a lot of folks on it. We're in New York City, so like we can encounter a shit ton of folks. And like I can look out my window at any given time, and there's like 5 to 10 people waiting on the B-38. Are any of those people real? Are they actual human beings?
I feel
it's
like
a fun question to ask.
That's why I asked.
Who are the NPCs? Who are they?
I generally don't believe in simulation theory, but I also got a complicated history of like Catholic dogma that's been pressed into my brain that I've had to reject later in life about, kind of, original sin and all that jazz. But like,
that's the practice for like the myth making that this takes, like that's where you get it from first, spoon fed from very young, every day you get a little shot up, and then you go through some things in life, and then you hit a certain age where it's like you cross that threshold after you experience a few certain things in life with like this relationship sounds pretty interesting. It's a release, it's a venture.
I mean, how many times have you spoken to someone and they tell you about something that happened to them and you see their reaction and how they're telling you the story and you're like, NPC, that's not a real human being. No way a real human being reacts like this to horrible news.
I think the only time that I feel like in my day-to-day life where simulation theory is attractive to me, other than in dark times where you start to think about like, is there a way maybe this doesn't count or matter, is riding the subway. is I ride the subway all the time and I just go like, all these people either have interior lives and have all sorts of things that are driving them, or they're just lines of code. And am I also lines of code? Like, I don't have main character syndrome. I know from the course my life has taken that I am not the main character in any story.
Oh,
I am.
I'm a main character for sure.
You would say that.
Absolutely.
No, I am. I'm
I
the
am
guy who
in control, bros.
I am at best the guy who hands you the wizard key at some point. Like, I'm not.
Yeah,
I'm
where
not
the
that
fuck is
guy.
my wizard key, by the way? I've been looking for
Yeah,
that thing everywhere.
yeah. Just say
God,
it.
just give it
Yeah,
to me. I'm so tired of searching.
you got to open it. It's in another castle.
Ah, son of a bitch. That's
More side,
always in another castle.
more side quests.
Exactly.
Yeah, I guess I'm not a main character at all.
No.
Ooh, Gary. Hi, Gary.
Hi,
How are you?
Jeff.
How are you feeling, buddy? That
My
was
brain,
weird.
my brain hurts, dude.
That was weird.
I don't think I got any clarity about this movie from that conversation.
No, well, there's
I
no such thing.
I really enjoyed talking to
Of
Elucid
course,
about this
of
movie,
course.
and I do like the idea of bringing on an artist as kind of like introspective and thoughtful and thought-provoking and provocative as he is to talk about a piece of cinema like this.
Yep.
But I feel like I'm drained. I feel drained at the end of this. That's
I
how I feel.
agree. I do too. And it seems like we decided to do movies from our youth,
Mm,
the 90s.
the 90s.
And we've been picking a lot of strange films.
Like strange little movies. Like I sort of feel like we're losing the plot because we've done like
The Crow, Serial
Nightbreed,
Mom, Nightbreed. That was
Nightbreed,
a
Toy
wild one.
Soldiers, you know,
Two
we're
Cronenbergs.
dead presidents. Like we didn't even do Menace to Society. We're like dead
No,
presidents,
we
please.
did Dead
Like
Presidents.
we're not making the obvious picks, and now we're at eXistenZ. We're talking about Cronenberg, possibly like the nadir of Cronenberg's career
Yeah.
as a director. You
Mm.
know, in a '90s run that's full of iffy pictures. I mean, I love
Mm.
Naked Lunch personally, but iffy pictures, Crash, the M Butterfly adaptation. Like I'm
This
sort
was the
of
first original script he had written since Videodrome.
since Videodrome, and some would call it a sequel, either
Mm.
spiritually or otherwise to Videodrome, which I
Mhm.
get to some extent, but that's just I feel like that's saying too much about it. That's just
Yeah.
world building, but it's like.
So we're on a weird path, is what you're
But
saying.
this
We're on a
isn't. But
weird path.
this wasn't the '90s for us,
No.
was it? I mean, there's some of these films we did see. I had seen eXistenZ. I had seen Toy Soldiers, but like, this is not what defined the '90s for us
Nothing would
or
define
anyone.
nothing would define Cabbages choosing and being the main characters in our reality like us doing some blockbusters.
Yeah, God.
What were people going to see? What were they actually going to see during this time period?
Like, do you remember when we did Wild Wild West?
Yeah. People actually
Like
went to see that.
the big budget flop.
Yeah.
People saw it though and had
Yep.
opinions on it. A lot
Yep.
of these films that we're talking about, no one watched.
That was a TBS film that came on TBS TNT all the time.
Yeah.
Like that was a
People
movie a lot of people, even if they didn't go see it in the theater, tons of people saw that piece of garbage.
I think we need to start looking at it. We're finishing off this calendar year. We're in the holiday season.
Hmm.
When we
Happy
start in,
holidays.
when we start in the new year, let's keep the singing to a minimum.
Wow, what is this anger?
But also, let's pick some better. Oh, let's pick some better movies. Let's pick some big movies. Let's take some big swings. How
Let's
about
take
that?
some big swings. I'm with taking some big swings. There's
Because
a lot of big movies that we have not gotten anywhere near. Let's get some wild plots. Let's get some big stars. Let's get some cliffhangers.
Let's get some films that have like stakes, not just in the course of their story, but in the success of those films. The success
like
of those
Cliffhanger.
films. Cliffhanger is a great example.
It's a great example.
It's a great example. Because like, you know, if we
Stallone
keep
was
doing
huge.
If we keep doing these small films, these weird films, these little things, like people are gonna have trouble following us. And at some point, it's gonna just be like, it's like we're asking them to stop listening, stop watching. Like
we are trying to sell a product. We're trying to sell a product, and nothing sells product like big action, like big blockbuster films.
So if you
what were the summer blockbusters? Let's get it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So if you think Cabbages has been getting too weird and niche, and you want us to do bigger movies,
like Cliffhanger,
let us know. Let us know. And otherwise, you're gonna have to stop us. You're gonna have to stop us. Somebody stop me.
It's the Cabbages Podcast Network.